pick up where we left off last time and continue in the calculator assignment. As I just was stating, starting any project, you start by creating the project, you do the initial layout, you name the controls, and then you wire the event handlers. I'm going to take my thumb drive, I'm going to plug my thumb drive in now, and then I'm going to start Visual Studio. You can do these in either order. You want to get back to where you were previously working on the project. So in the recent list over here, I have my calculator assignment. I might name mine Calc Assignment. So I'm just going to click on that. And it's going to load my calculator assignment from my thumb drive. Why don't all of you get to that point, and we'll continue on where we left off. We should all be pretty close to the same spot. If you got done with all the initial steps that we did last time, your screen should look something like this. We've got 3 text boxes across the top. These are going to be places where you type numbers to begin. And then you're going to have 5 buttons along here. These are going to be your add, subtract, multiply, divide, and average buttons. And then this text block down here is where the answer will be displayed. Anybody having a problem getting to this point so far? Nope, you're going to the C drive. You're on the wrong place. Go to the D1. That's your thumb drive, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Double click on main window XAML. Good? All right. You're not in the right place. Close that.
Yeah.
You need to run Visual Studio.
Oh, okay.
Click on the window thing, type Visual, type VIS. There. Okay. So of our initial steps, we've created our project. We've done the initial bare bones layout. However, I want this button to say Add. If we look at the assignment, it says Add, Subtract, Multiply, Divide, and Average as the names of the buttons. You don't have to use those same names, but you need to use something that's useful there so you know what the buttons do. So I'm going to select the first button. Yeah, don't double click. Important safety tip. Single click the button, and then down here in the properties window down over here, it shows the content of the button says it's button. I'm going to change that to say add. I'm going to type add and press enter. And if I zoom back out, you see that the button now displays the word add instead of the word button. I'm going to select the next button with a single click, go down there where it says button, and I'm going to put subtract. Next one, I'm going to do multiply. You see how we're doing this? Multiply, divide, then average. So I've got the initial text displayed on each of my 5 buttons. That's just display text. Now the assignment says, not that, all right, the assignment says that the 3 text boxes that we'll be typing numbers into should have the initial values of 50, 10, and 2. Notice how it says 50, 10, and 2 in each of these boxes? Right now mine says text box, and text box. So I'm going to single click the first one, and down here in the properties section, you see it for the text property. Right now it says text box. I'm going to put 50. And if I come back up here, you see that says 50 now. I'm going to select the next one, come down here, change that to say 10. Go to the third one, change that to say 2. So yours should look something like this. The 3 text boxes say 50, 10, and 2 as their initial values. The 5 buttons, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and average. Good so far? Now we're going to do something kind of cosmetic. This box down here is going to be where we display the answer. We're going to play around with the font just a little bit and a little bit of styling. So the font that's used, if I go down, so I've selected this text block, and I go look at my properties down here, and there's this area called text, and it says right now it's going to use the Segoe UI font and a 12 pixel font size. The font size. I'm going to change the font size to be something a little bit more interesting. 24. And I come up here and I can see that now it shows this nice big text. You can choose a different size, whatever you want. Now, you might be detail-oriented, you might not be. This is purely optional. If you want the text in your text block to be centered, notice how right now mine is kind of left justified, and I can even make it a little bit more obtuse by widening this out, and you kind of see it's like, okay, well, that's not very pretty. But the number I put in there might be 0, it might be 1, it might be 500, or something like that. So I want that text centered in there. This is purely optional. I select my text block, and I come down to the properties over here. With the text block selected, there's this little search bar up here where I can search through the properties on the text block to find the property I'm looking for. I'm clicked in the search box for the properties of the text block, and I'm typed the word align. And it shows me all the properties that have align as part of their name. It is not horizontal or vertical alignment that we are caring about. It's this one over in the lower right. If I just put my mouse over it, it says text alignment. Sorry, I can't get this higher on the screen. Right now it says left. I'm going to click on the word left, and I'm going to say center. Now if I zoom back out, you'll see that the text in my text block is now centered. Purely cosmetic, purely optional. People ask about it. Okay, according to what the assignment is looking like right now, I have my 3 text boxes with 50, 10, and 2. I have my 5 buttons, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and average, and I have a place that my answer will be displayed. I have the basic building blocks. So we've done the create the project, we've done the initial layout. Now we're going to go through and name the controls. Naming the controls is essentially giving them a variable name. So we have to follow all of the conventions of a variable name. Variable names can be letters A through Z, upper or lowercase, numbers 0 through 9, and underscores. I'm going to go to this very first text box up here, and I'm going to start giving them names. Now the name you give it is needs to be unique within your entire program. Nobody else, nothing else in your program, in your code, will be able to use this same name. So it needs to be unique and one that you're not going to stomp over later. You'll see how that will come into play later, so I won't elaborate too much on that. Oh, I'm sorry, back in the properties down here where we searched for a line, after we did the damage we wanted to do, I'm just going to clear this search so I see all the properties again. So, okay. With this text box selected, I'm going to go over to the properties window down here. And it says the name right now is called text box. That's not very useful. Now this text box is one of three that are going to be the three values that people type. And so you could call it a lot of different things. I'm going to call it text box value 1. That's really obtuse. I don't like typing that much. And so I'm going to just call it TB value 1. TB to me is an abbreviation for text box. It also could be an abbreviation for text block, but I'll keep it straight in my mind. TB value 1. Notice how I kept the followed the camel case thing. Lowercase first letter of the first word, uppercase letter of each subsequent word. So TB value 1. You could argue that text box is 2 words or 1 word. I'm treating it as 1 word right now. And so V is capitalized. So the next one, what do you think I'm going to name the next one? TB value 2. And then the third one is going to be TB value 3. In my world, you do not have to follow these exact same names. So if I single select each one across the way, I can see the name is changing to TB value 1, TB value 2, TB value 3. So I know I've got that straight. Now I've got these buttons. Right now they're all one's called button, button 1, button 2. That's not very useful names. Button 3, button 4. So my add button, the very first of my buttons, I'm going to give it something that I like to use. I like to call it BTN. You could call it button, or you could say but or B or whatever you want. So I'm doing button BTN add is my first one. Again, you can choose your own naming methodology. I would stick with that same. So across all 5 buttons, you can probably already guess what I'm going to name them all. So this one's BTN add. I'm going to call this one button BTN sub, BTN mol, BTN div, BTN av. You can spell out average if you want. You can just something so it's meaningful and kind of uniform. So I select the second one, and I'm going to call it BTN sub. The third one, BTN mol. Fourth one, BTN div. And the fifth one, BTN av. Whoop, I didn't get it right. Did I get the BTN div one? Yep, okay. So now I have my 5 buttons named BTN add, sub, mol, div, av. Good so far? The last control I need to name is this guy. This guy is going to be my answer. Now, when I run my program, it's going to say text block there, and I think, that's not so pretty. I'm going to go down here just for cosmetic reasons, and instead of saying text block, I'm going to just say answer. So it's just displaying the text answer. That's just cosmetics. But I need to give this guy a name. So I select him, and I come down here. I'm going to call him TXT answer. TXT for me will be meaning it's a text block. You can choose to name it something different. Make sure you follow the camel naming convention. Letters, numbers, and underscores only. Case matters. TXT capital answer is different than TXT lowercase answer. So I have gone through all 5, 6, 9 controls, and I've given them all names. I can check that quickly by just single selecting each one and looking at this names box down here, the name box, and make sure that they're all named what I expect them to be. None of them can be named the same name, and the names that I'm using here are their variable names. So I'll be using them in my code that way. Everybody up to this point okay? So with the starting of our project, we create our project, we did the initial layout, we've given names to all the controls. Now we're going to wire the event handlers. The event handlers only really apply to the 5 buttons, meaning that when I click the add button, I want a piece of code to run. And that piece of code is going to interact with a couple other things. But the add button has its own little piece of code. The subtract button is going to have its own piece of code, and so on and so forth across these 5 buttons. So the event handler for the add button doesn't exist right now. To create one, there's multiple ways of creating the event handler. The easiest way is what I'm going to show you right now. With the button not selected, make sure the button's not selected. So I just clicked in the white space out here. I'm going to put my mouse over the button and I'm going to double click it. And after a second, it takes me to the code tab and shows me that it's created the stub, if you will, the empty code for when the button add is clicked. This is the event handler for the button add button. Yep. We're going to do this a bunch more times. So there's the 2 tabs up here. I'm going to go back to my designer window. I clicked in the white area. I'm going to go to my subtract button. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to double click my subtract button, and now it created my BTN sub click, subtraction button clicked. I'm going to walk through and do that for all 5 of those. So I've done it for the first 2. Double click on multiply, double click on divide, and double click on average.
How do you get back to the...
So there's these 2 tabs up here. I'm just clicking back and forth between the tabs. To test that everything is currently working, I haven't really done any code yet. I've just been creating this empty skeleton. I'm going to click the Start button, which will compile and run my application. After a moment of compilation, it takes a while for the first time every time you run it. There's my beautiful window. You'll notice that I have the names in all the buttons. I have the initial values in my text boxes. And it displays the word answer. I can click on any of these buttons. There's nothing in the code right now, so it's actually calling that code, and it's saying, oh, there's nothing here to do. Okay, moving on. Your app should be something like this right now. Would you please raise your hand if you're stuck or having any problems?
So all my buttons work except for the add one. When I do the add one, it just says button underscore click.
For the add?
Yeah.
Go back over here. Okay, that means you probably double-clicked it before you...
I've done it before.
Yeah. It's okay just so long as you remember that one is add.
Okay.
You'll survive.
Okay.
If you really want to, I can reset it all for you, but it's...
That was okay.
Everybody okay? Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to go to my code And I'm going to focus on the Add button. This is a good time when you want to be looking at your worksheet that you got back from me today. I believe you've all gotten the worksheet back. Down in section 3 of the worksheet, there's a bunch of answers to what I'm about to ask you. So when I'm coding, notice there are these two braces right here. If you accidentally delete one of the braces, get it back there as quick as you can. Everything falls apart if you accidentally delete any of the braces. So I'm going to start coding in between the braces here of the Add button. I'm going to put some comments first to kind of outline what we're going to do, and then you're going to help me figure out how to code it.
Wait, so now I have 2 tabs, but let me go back to the Or is it this one?
So this is the code window, that's the designer window. Oh, your program's running down here. Close your program. And just close that guy, yeah. And then it goes back to what you expect. Good.
So now I'm in the coding window?
Yeah, we're in the coding window where we have our button add code that we're going to write. So our button code, we've got to do something like this. We've got these, when we click add, we want to take these 3 numbers, add them together, and display it here. Those are the steps we want to do. So I'm going to kind of outline that. I'm going to start by doing comments. We did these comments in Draw a House. I want to get 3 numbers, add the numbers together. This is just my outline or notes to myself, and then display the answer. Again, these are just comments. You could be writing this down on a paper or just have it mentally written down in your mind and spell numbers right. All right. So we've got to get 3 numbers. Well, how do we get one of those numbers? In question number 3 on your worksheet, letter C, 3C, what does it tell you to do? We're going to convert, 3C says convert text from a text box to an integer and assign it to a variable named, in this case, age. That's exactly what we want to do, but we're going to change the names a little bit, right? We're taking the text out of the text box. We're going to convert it to an integer. We're going to put it into a variable. So I need to create, just simply, I'm going to kind of type what we already typed in the answer there. We did age equals, this is not the answer, but I'm just going to kind of start with this. We did a convert dot to int32, and we took something from text box input dot text. That was something like what we did for 3C, right? If you have your worksheet there. But in our case, that text box isn't called text box input. What did we call it? The text box, there's 3 text boxes up here. I named mine TB value 1. Your name might be different. That's okay. So I'm going to put TB value 1 here. TB value 1. And I'm not going to call it age. That doesn't make any sense. This is the first of my 3 numbers. I'm just going to call it value 1. You could call it something different. But notice that this variable name value 1 is lowercase value and the number 1. This is TB value 1. So these are 2 different variable names, which is perfect. They need to be different. But I can kind of correlate it in my brain that this is one of the value. This is the text box, TB value 1 is the text box, and value 1 is the integer that we got out of that text box. Does this make sense? So if I need to get all three of those numbers, I'm going to repeat this same line 3 times, but changing the values just slightly, right? Now before you type any more lines, pro tip. Here's your pro tip for Visual Studio. I'm going to put my cursor, doesn't matter, I'm just going to put it anywhere on that line that I want to duplicate. Nothing is selected. I'm going to hit Control C. Control C copied the whole line into the clipboard, Windows clipboard. And now I just simply hit Control V, and it put another copy of the line. I'm going to hit Control V a second time, and I have 3 copies of the same line. But the second line I wanted to do from TB value 2, and the third line is TB value 3, and I'm going to name this value 2 and value 3. So now I have 3 lines. This takes the text box, the text from text box value 1, converts it to an integer, puts it into a newly declared variable called value 1. The second line, taking the text from TB value 2, converts it to an integer, stores it in a newly created integer variable called value 2, and so forth, value 3. Make sense so far? Anybody having a problem getting to that point? It's pretty straightforward. All right, so now I want to add the 3 numbers together. Well, I can add the 3 numbers together, but I have to store it somewhere so I can then subsequently use it for displaying. So I need to create a storage location. What kind of storage location do I want to create? I want an integer, and I'm going to call it the answer. And I'm saying that the answer is equal to, well, we want to add the 3 values together. So I'm going to say value 1 plus value 2 plus value 3. And I put a semicolon at the end. So this is simply saying take those 3 integer values, add them together using the operator, the add operator, because they're integers, the plus sign is the add operator, adding those 3 together, and then assigning the result of that expression, or the value of that expression, into a newly created variable called answer. Now I want to display the answer. Well, gee, I wonder if there's something on the worksheet that would be useful. Well, so on the worksheet we have something that says, we'll go 3D. So on the worksheet we said text output dot text is equal to hello plus name. Now, that's not what we're doing here. We're wanting to display what's the name of the text block where we're going to display this. Let's see, I forgot, so I'm going to come back over here. This is where we're going to display it. I called mine, or named mine, txt answer. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say this is txt answer. And I'm not displaying name, I want to display answer. And I don't want to say hello, I'm going to actually say nothing there. I just want to display the answer. But it immediately shows underscores here. Yours is probably doing the same thing. If I put my mouse over the red underscore, it says, hey, it says cannot implicitly convert type int to string. It's basically saying, this is an integer, this is expecting a string. What are you doing? So if I put quotes around it, as was suggested, it will display the word answer. That's not what we want. We want the value that's in the integer variable called answer. So we need to convert it. So I'm going to use this convert guy, and I'm going to say I want to take this answer, this variable, and I want to convert it to a string. Over here we did convert to int32, which is basically saying convert it to an integer. Here we're going to take this integer, which is answer, convert it to a string, and then we can assign it to be displayed. I'm going to run my program now. I have 50, 10, and 2, so if I say add, it should display 62. If I want to change that number to be 500, whoops, no P, now it's 512. I have a calculator that can add 3 numbers together. Isn't that fabulous? Maybe it's nothing to write home about. Did this make sense? What would you do for the subtraction one?
You just do the exact same thing, but instead of the add numbers together, you subtract them.
So Michael says you'd take the exact same thing. I would copy and paste all of this down into subtract and then just change it appropriately. Okay, we're going to stop and let you work. Please raise your hand if you get stuck.
Minus